Hi everyone, so today I'm back with a couple of top tips to you. Now I do recommend for our top tip videos, go and get yourself a notebook and pen. And remember, you can always pause this video or again you can always rewind it. We always recommend our students to have their own notebook. There's nothing like your own notes. And every flower has its own page and you've wrote down your experiences with these flowers. So again, you can now add my top tips to it. But everybody differs. You may listen to another florist and she'll have something different to add to it. So eventually you will build up like all your top tips and tricks for prolonging the life of your flowers, because that's obviously what you want. So the flower that we're going to talk about today is iris. And iris kind of signify kind of like faith. So again, like they're a brilliant flower like for church arrangements. The variety of this iris here is called White Magic. Now these haven't been hydrated yet, they haven't been in water, they just have been delivered in from Holland. So a couple of notes for you to write down. They are available all the year round. So I know they seem to be kind of more popular around kind of like spring, early summer, but you can get them all the year round and they're quite reasonably priced most of the year round. They're available, I suppose, the most popular colour that you're probably familiar with would be kind of like the pale lilac mauves and the dark purples. But you can also get them in the whites and the lemons, okay? And I suppose what's really significant about the iris is, and you can't really see it yet, but it's the yellow kind of stripe that's on the inside of them. So especially with the purple one, you have that contrasting yellow tongue, yellow stripe on the inside against the kind of like dark, vibrant, you know what I mean, dark purple. You will find with white iris, some growers have actually worked it, that there's a snow white iris out there. So again, if you needed to research it or you could organise it with your supplier, it is possible to get it. But most of the white iris would have the yellow stripe on the inside. I will kind of blow this one and I'll let you see it on, I'll let you see what it looks like. Temperature wise, they prefer anything between 2 and 5 degrees Celsius, so a cooler room. They're not a long-lasting flower. Like people will say between 5 and 7 days. If they're kept in a cool room, they will definitely last the 7 days and you might even get the 8 out of them. But if they're in a warm room, you'll be lucky just to get the 5 days out of them. They do open pretty fast, but you can see like in this bunch here, because when you're buying them in wholesale, there's 50 stems in a bunch, and you can see there's a combination of really tight ones and then some that are that little bit more open. Now the great thing about the tight ones is they are going to last that little bit longer for your customer. But when you place them in either your bunch flowers that you're sending out, your hand tied, or even in your flower arrangement, they're a little bit disappointing, you know, that sort of way, when you're not actually seeing a little bit of colour on them. So it is handy to know a couple of little tips. And what I often find is if, say, the green kind of like stem, the green kind of covering leaf that's coming up close around the iris, if you were to kind of like gently just peel that back, and then cup your hand around it, okay, as you can see there, and blow hard down into the centre of the flower. Especially if you don't smoke, you'll be able to blow it. And that way there, you have forced the flower open, so you can now see the fabulous colour on the inside, but yet you actually haven't damaged it, or you haven't actually decreased the longevity of the flower. It hasn't caused any harm. Where sometimes people will get and they'll start kind of pulling the petals down with their fingers, and that actually will damage the flower. So what you need to do is when you buy in your iris, okay, is have your vases sterilised, and I have lots of tutorials on YouTube about sterilising buckets and vases. And have it half filled with clean water. It's really important that the water is clean. I often say to the students, if you're not willing to drink out of that vase, don't put your flowers into it. So everything has to be scrupulously clean. I always advise use flower food, especially the first time. Your flowers have been out watered for 2, maybe 3 days, depending on what country you live in, while they were being transported from Holland, say, to your country. So it's really important that you give them that little kickstart, and that's where you'll find the flower food is great. So you have your vase prepared, scrupulously clean, fresh clean water and flower food. What I recommend is off the end of all your flowers is cut a minimum of 1 inch, 1 to 2 centimetres, and cut it on a slant. When you cut on a slant, you open up a bigger hole than if you were to say to cut straight across. So that way then the flower can drink up more water to the angled cut. The other thing is, as soon as a flower is cut, it immediately sucks up water. So if you're ever trying to force your flowers, you know, the really tight like iris buds there, if you're trying to force them open for an occasion, because I always kind of find with iris is you're as well to kind of encourage them to get them open, because the maximum they're going to last is 7 days, you know, that way maybe 8. You're not going to get 2 weeks out of them. So just by keeping them tight, you know, that way, and holding them back, they're just going to die kind of closed. So you might as well encourage them to open up. So by recutting them every day, like even taking 1 centimetre off every day on that 45-degree angle, that will definitely encourage them to open. They do have a soft enough stem, but in saying that, they're ideal for sticking into floral foam. They're firm enough and strong enough to stick down into floral foam. That's probably the average length that you're going to get out of them, do you know, that way? But again, if you're using, like, say, jumbo blocks of floral foam and you're doing church displays, I kind of find I can get the extra bit of height out of them. Or even for topiary trees, I kind of find that the shape, along with maybe germanees or roses or hydrangeas or large carnations, they're an ideal flower, you know what I mean, to complement like the rounded shape. Avoid having them in the sunlight, because obviously the sun will encourage them to open pretty fast and then they'll die that little bit quicker. They're not a popular flower for weddings, but you would often see in a spring wedding bouquet, they would include like a couple of the iris. And then especially if the wedding flowers were kind of like them dark chocolate purple or Cadbury's purple as I describe it, again, it's an ideal flower, you know, that way, to kind of incorporate into it. Hopefully you picked up a couple of tips there and a couple of little tricks. If you have any questions at all, feel free to post all your questions in the comments below. We will respond back to all your questions at some stage. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I'd really appreciate if you shared this video. And my name is Janette and I'm from Kay's Flower School.